All right, I think we'll get started then. So welcome to Career Journey Towards Sustainability, one of our final virtual sessions of our weekend of UWCSEA's forum, Learning to Shape the Future. Again, I hope you've enjoyed all that we've had to offer this weekend. There have been so many virtual sessions, some fantastic keynote addresses, and I think that there is much work to be done coming out of this forum, which is very exciting for all of us. So I did mention the app. Please do be sure to continue to refresh it over the rest of the afternoon to make sure you've got all the most up-to-date links and announcements. And if you're having any trouble, you can always email forum@uwcsea.edu.sg or pop a question in the Q&A feature of your main menu on the app. This session is being seen in Zoom, and this is a Zoom webinar, so you will be able to participate via the chat function and the Q&A, which we'll get to later on, so keep those questions coming. And we will invite you to join us for a more interactive session in an online networking event following this, and we will drop a link to that session in the chat room just before we leave so that you should be able to make an easy transition into that space. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to our moderator for today's event, Katarina Radosavljevic.
Thank you, Renee. So hi, everyone. My name is Katarina, and I'm one of the founding members and the coordinator of the Parent Association Dover Sustainability Team. It's a great pleasure to host this panel today. Welcome to all of you, and I'm looking forward to a great discussion. So I would like to introduce you first for UWCSEA parents and members of the Parent Association Sustainability. So we have Robin Carney, worked many years as a consultant in different industries and countries, and is now working for a non-governmental organization that protects the environment. Then we have Masayo. Masayo had embarked on a sustainability career journey before sustainability was even trendy. Her expertise is in environment sustainability and the value chain. She's also one of the founding members of the PA Sustainability team. Then we have Armin. Armin Geltinger has been working in the financial industry for the past 20 years, but is now focusing on advising and educating banks, asset managers, and regulators about sustainability, climate change, and ESG investing. Then finally, we have Smita Mitra. Who worked with United Nations of Women and Child Rights. Now she works in the cybersecurity focused on protecting vulnerable communities against abuse and exploitation. So for more detail, I invite you to read the panelist biography afterwards. So welcome to the panelists. We have normally a fifth panelist, but he's running a little bit late, so we hope that he can be able to join on time. So we will be carrying on our program. So for today's session, today's session is focused on 3 key points. The first one is to share with you how parents from the UWC community have transitioned to careers more aligned with their sustainability inspiration and how they practice sustainability at different levels within the organization and in the areas of expertise. The second key point is to highlight how education can support this transition. Finally, our third key point is to encourage you to explore and find opportunities in your professional sphere to drive the required change for a sustainable future. We hope that today you will find this conversation insightful. So this discussion will be a brief introduction about sustainability and careers. We won't be able to go deeply in the subject, so please feel free to join the networking event afterwards with our panelists. So first, I would like to start this discussion by asking the UWC Parents panelists to share with us their specific sustainability journey. So Robin, Masayo, Armin, and Smita, I would like to know what prompted you to move to career in sustainability. How did you transition to a role or a position to become more in line with sustainability? And what has been your positive outcome of that change? So I'm going to start with Robin. Robin, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Katerina. It's really a pleasure to be here today, and I'm happy to share a little bit about my career journey and how I ended up working in sustainability. So as far as education, I studied at the University of Pennsylvania. As an undergrad, I studied international relations, and then I got an MBA in finance. And I began my career as a management consultant with Deloitte, one of the big four. As a consultant, I had the opportunity to work with businesses across many different industries. So everything from insurance to telecom to magazine publishing. And the skill set that I developed was, of course, project management, but also perhaps more importantly, an understanding of how business people think, how they prioritize, and how they decide what is important to the company or to their own personal careers. That skill would become really important when I became a fundraiser for nonprofits. And I had to connect with successful people, decide how to position a project so that it aligned with their personal or professional goals. So Deloitte sent me on a rotation overseas to Lisbon, Portugal, which soon became home. And I chose to leave Deloitte in order to stay in Portugal long term. In between doing some freelance consulting and having my two daughters, who are now both in high school here at UWC Dover, I was offered the opportunity to volunteer with a breast cancer charity founded by other expat women in Portugal. And this really meant something to me personally because my mother is a breast cancer survivor. I joined their board, and I was soon picking up a new set of skills, which is learning how to talk about a cause with both individuals and corporates and finding ways to work together. So this actually led to my first paid position in philanthropy. When we moved to Belgium, I was hired to launch the fundraising unit for the largest international academic research network dedicated to finding breast cancer treatments and cures. And together with my team, we packaged some very complex medical research projects into marketable campaigns that we could use to talk to donors and easily find a match for their own priorities. And I continued to work for this organization even as our family moved to Warsaw, Poland. I had my first taste of working from home. Our family's next move was to Korea, and I spent 4 years there working with a women's association that raised funds for local Korean charities, such as supporting unwed mothers and being trained for new job opportunities. The location was different and the cause was different, but the skill set really was the same. Find a way to present the project that matched the needs of the individual or the corporate that we were talking to try to bring them on board to support us. And then in 2019, I knew that our family was moving to Singapore, and there was one cause that I most wanted to work for, which was combating climate change and saving natural biodiversity. So I took an online course with the University of Michigan to build my understanding of those subjects. And my dream job was actually to work for WWF, the Worldwide Fund for Nature. So I was really fortunate to be invited to attend a conference where the previous WWF head of philanthropy was teaching a masterclass. And I spoke to her after the class and followed up with a conversation about my skill set, my objectives to work for an environmental nonprofit. And luckily the stars aligned. I was hired to join her team, and soon she returned to her native Australia. So I took over her role, and I'm now head of philanthropy at WWF. I've been with them for 2 years, and I feel extremely grateful that I now have the opportunity to connect with donors who wish to support green projects and the work that we do both here in Singapore and across the region. And I still rely on the same skill set that I developed as a consultant, which is understanding people's priorities and finding a way to meet their goals through the projects that we offer. One recent project that I'm really particularly proud of is the Tiger Trail, which you may have seen. This brought awareness of the need for tiger conservation in Southeast Asia through an art trail of 33 life-size tiger sculptures placed across Singapore for 6 weeks, including one designed and painted by UWC Dover student Olivia Huing in honor of the 50th anniversary of the school. This project has really given me an opportunity to talk with new audiences about the dangers that tigers face due to habitat loss and poaching, how entire landscapes benefit from having a healthy tiger population, and how we must all come together to bring this iconic species back from the brink. So ending up at WWF has been a wonderful journey. It's also changed my personal sustainability journey, making me more aware of the choices that I make and how they impact the planet. It was not a straight line, but I ended up here by going with the flow and following my goals to do meaningful work for the causes that I believe in. Thanks so much, and I'll turn it back over to you, Katerina.
Thank you, Robin. Masayo, would you like to share your experience with the audience?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Masayo. I'm originally from Japan, and I'm actually living in Singapore for last 20 years. Actually, I studied international relations in the United States, and I did my management degree for my master's. And I did not have any sustainability background as an academic degrees. So I think that right now I've been in this field for almost 18 years. First thing I can say is that without a degree, actually you can look for opportunity in this sustainability field. Going back to my early days, I came to Singapore after my internship in the States. I started working in academia, and that time I was in the charge of a project management for the earth science projects for PhD students and other master's students across Pacific Rim universities. So that time I started learning more about environmental issues. I did not know much about it. I only took one elective course, environmental related course when I was in college. So that was a time that I was forced to learn and be competent to be the coordinator to run the session for the students and academic researchers that time. Then actually the interest grew, and I started knowing that actually there is a position for environmental management. That time, in almost for 20 years ago, there was no word called sustainabilities or UN SDGs or ESGs. There was a terminology called EMS, Environmental Management System. This is actually for global certification called ISO 14001, and the companies were getting this certification to be credited so that they can say that they are environmentally concerned. So I decided to go for this EMS person in charge in the Japanese consumer electronic companies. I did not have knowledge on ISO certification or being an auditor or assessors. So I was sent to the courses, layers of courses. And then I picked up at the time of assessing by the companies, group companies with teams. So it is possible that as long as you have an interest and passions and learning opportunities, you are able to basically absorb the knowledge on the spot as a workplace. I was involved in this environmental management system, and then I had an opportunity to be the part of another Japanese printing companies, office printing companies in Singapore as a regional HQ to look after the environmental sustainability matters. So there I looked more involved in looking after the total value chain of energy, carbon, water, waste, and legal legislation, and so on. That time, the companies were started picking up. They had the terminology of ESG came up, but it was not very popular. We started talking about CSR, corporate social responsibilities. So that time we had a lot of companies had a lot of transition to be partnership with NGOs and grassroots So I started knowing more people by being in a part of a CSR project team. After the transition of CSR themes, the industry started picking up on the terminology of CSV, creating shared value. So that time, I could actually feel that the companies, they started being more open to disclose what they want to do together with the stakeholders. And after that, I moved to American snack company, where I am in now. Actually, I realized changing an industry from consumer electronics or information communication technology industry to food or snacking industries. Actually, what we are looking at the bottom line is the same. We have to look after energy, how we are created, how we use the water, waste, recycle, how to disclose our sustainability performance to the stakeholders. I see more and more, I see lots of companies trying to diversify the sustainability agenda across divisions. So my message is that actually it is very important for not just the one section of the company's person, but everyone in finance, engineering, procurement, marketing or sales, or even operations or logistics. They all need to take and play a role to for sustainability agenda for the company's ambitions. So I would say that this is very important transition right now as an industry towards 2025, 2030, and 2050, which many of the companies are setting up the goal for, let's say, decarbonization or carbon net zero transition. More and more companies are disclosing sustainability, non-financial data and performance and information to stakeholders. So it is very important stage of the industries together with many other industries like financial industries. So ESG is stands for environmental and social governance. This is something that very one of the key hot topic and important framework for company and industries and even stakeholders to look after, to see of our sustainability journey as a whole. So I would say that this is something that very exciting for us to be in the actually the forefront of our sustainability the journey. And this is something that all of us, not just the manufacturers, but everyone has to play a role. So that's something that I like to leave with them as a message. Thank you.
Thank you, Masayo. Armin, it's your turn.
Thanks, Kat. My name is Armin, and I'm really delighted to be part of this panel and share my personal experience with the wider UWC community. For my background, I have a very common background for people who work in the financial industry. So I studied economics on an undergraduate level and then business as a postgraduate level. And after university, joining management consulting, the industry focusing on financial services. And after a number of years, actually then moved on to the investment banking floor, working for a big European bank at that time in Europe. After a number of years there, I moved slightly sideways to private banking and wealth management, and again spent more than 12, 15 years as part of several European banks. Now, all along, I was scuba diving. So I started my scuba diving certification, similar time when I started my professional career, so more than 20 years ago. And I really enjoyed that experience. I became very passionate. I really wanted to also start protecting the ocean environment, right? Because I also witnessed firsthand the effects of climate change. So for instance, you know, when I went diving here in Southeast Asia, I could notice over the years a change in the temperature of the surface water, right? Likewise, I could see coral bleaching events happening there, where there used to be beautiful, large scale, you know, coral reefs and teeming with life. And then, you know, half of it or even more, you know, just becomes a underwater desert. And likewise, plastic pollution. You know, there's hardly any dive where I will not find any sort of floating plastic bags, nappies, plastic bottles, anything we use in our daily life that can be found then at the bottom of the ocean. And that really started then my journey to also want to educate myself a bit more. So I started with some online, you know, education-free courses, focusing more on the oceans, but then slowly moving to climate change, to sustainability, and then really did a couple of such courses focusing on sustainable finance, strategy and sustainability, which are really then more meaningful also for my career. And then last year, I left sort of the management consulting part behind, that I rejoined afterwards and joined a company called Fitch. And as part of that group, I work in a division that actually educates and helps all the different players in the financial industry. So my role is really that I go to commercial banks, asset management firms, sovereign wealth funds, central banks and regulators. And I talk about sustainability issues. I talk about climate change and climate risks. What kind of impact will those have to, you know, their business and to their loan book, to their investments, to their, you know, clients. And then likely, you know, as Masayo mentioned, you know, the big buzzword in our industry, in the financial industry, is really ESG, environmental, social, and governance factors, which is really a different way to look at sustainability, because we need sustainability in all three areas, right? On the environment, as well as on the social aspect and on the economic side. And yeah, I train, I teach, you know, the professionals at these organizations about these issues from a very fundamental level all the way up to helping them actually then also gain some professional qualifications, such as the ESG investment qualification of the CFA Institute. And that obviously then can also help those individuals in their careers and pivot a bit their daily work in the direction of making the business and the world more sustainable. Thank you, and back to you, Kat.
Thank you, Armin. Smita, would you like to share your journey?
Thank you so much, Katerina. My name is Smita Mitra, and I have done my master's in social work. And prior to that, I was studying political science, history. So after political science, when I did my master's in social work, the gradual shift was working towards non-governmental organizations. So I worked in non-governmental organizations in India on different issues, from child marriage to sexual reproductive health and rights, maternal and child health, nutrition, and also anti-human trafficking. So understanding the geography of India, there was a lot of trafficking some 15, 20 years back. Now it happens in a different forum. I will come to that. But cross-border trafficking was a very, very important issue in terms of gender equality and rights of children. So I was working on those issues on trans-border areas of India and Nepal, and in the sexual reproductive health domain, the rights of commercial sex workers, HIV, AIDS, and how to prevent AIDS, how to talk about sexuality, how to advocate sexuality education. This by and by brought me to my next career move, which was United Nations Women, UN Women. At that point in time, it was called UNIFEM. So while I was working for UN Women, I was working very closely on issues of women migrant workers, women who were migrating from South and Southeast Asia to the Arab region, and how their rights could be protected. Now, if you look back at my journey, it has always been social work, it has been rights, protecting the rights of vulnerable sections of the community, as well as raising the accountability of the governance machinery. Coming back to UN Women, I was working on different aspects of training the military and the peacekeepers before they were deployed on UN missions. So that was largely my background with UN Women. While we were working with UN Women, that was the time when national and regional working groups were being found in order to contribute to the formulation of the Sustainable Development Goals. So when the Sustainable Development Goals were getting brainstormed and worked upon, their targets were being formed. As a UN employee and as a UN member state in India through Southeast Asian consultations and South Asia consultations, we were contributing to the SDG that we are talking about now. So that was about South Asia and my work in India. Out here in Singapore, I work more on cybersecurity, which is also another part of protecting the cyberspace for vulnerable children. COVID times has taught us that how internet is an important aspect of our lives, not just in terms of fun and entertainment, but also in terms of basic education for our children. So right now, working for Interpol, I work on crimes against children, and I particularly help our member states on how to make cyberspace a safe space for kids so that they are free of any kind of abuse, exploitation, bullying. So that brings me to my career journey. Throughout, it has been protection of vulnerable sections of the community, whether it is in terms of human rights in the field, in the physical space, or in the virtual space in the online area. Thank you. Over to you, Kat.
Thank you, Smita. So I think, I'm sorry to say, but we haven't seen the Professor and Visser connected, and I'm sure there's a good reason behind. I'm sorry for today. So we will be taking the Q&A, and maybe what I would like to say first regarding our panelists, parents panelists, it's today you had a kind of like an overview of different careers, different expertise, and different fields. But please just keep in mind that the concept of sustainability, it's not just a concept where we're talking about environment, we talk about economy, we're talking about people. So today, this is what you have, panelist guest. So we have Armin, who represents everything what is about economy. Then we have Robin that covers the environment part. And we have Masayo as well. And at the end, we have Smita that represents the human rights and the people. So I would like just to state that no matter which UN SDG goals you will go for to defend your cause, it could be education, it could be gender equality, it could be climate change, it could be partnership. No matter which one you try to take on board, please just go ahead, because they are all interlinked and they're all interconnected. So this was my last thing to say. And because the professor will probably not join us today, I would like just to share with you my career. So for me, I'm in a transition. So my teammate already made the transition, but I'm making my transition right now. So my background is in urbanism and urban planning, and I'm also an architect. So during 12 years, I worked in both of the fields. I had to design projects on a bigger scale, city scales, smaller scale, interior design or design, and in between I also had to design buildings. So when I was practicing architecture, it was no awareness of sustainability. Even though I was always attracted to it, it was very difficult to implement. And then when I had my daughter, I thought, oh, it's a good time maybe to think about what I would like to do next. And at that time, my daughter, few years later, joined UWC, and I joined the Parent Association, and we created with other parents the sustainability team. So at the beginning, when I started, I didn't know anything about it. I mean, I knew the word, but I didn't know how do you practice it. So we started during talks, workshops, and bringing awareness about it. And slowly I started learning about it. And this led me, after 4 years of leading this team and learning quite a lot, to kind of like, okay, how can I move a step up in my journey? And then I decided to go for a course in sustainability. So I did the one with Cambridge Institute of Sustainability. And after this course, it was obvious for me that it could be very easily, it would be kind of like easy to pass from my career to continue what I know and take my skills and to adapt them for sustainability. For instance, as a designer, we design, we use materials, but we don't necessarily think about what we do with these materials. And most of the time, like for example, concrete, once we demolished one building, what do we do with it? And when we're thinking about on a project, most of the time we don't think about that. We think about cost, we think about our clients, we think about how pretty it could be, but we don't think about the reality. What do we do once these materials are disposed? What do we do to do better for the environment? And so I thought the buildings generates quite a lot of carbon emissions, and I thought I have a role to play there. So I wanted to top up with more knowledge. So my next step will be, okay, how do we understand the carbon footprint, not just on a surface, but a little bit more deeper, and how I can drive the change in my industry. So yeah, here we go. So I'm in the middle of this transition. So I wish I could share the success of it, but I'm just saying that it's pretty easy. It's like another skill you add on your CV, but then the best thing is, okay, I do it for the next generation and I feel good about it. It's not about myself only, it's about all the other people. So yes. So we will now maybe pass on a Q&A. And so if you have any questions for our panelists, we will be very happy to answer. So please go ahead.
So, I can see that we have a few questions coming in, and it looks like a lot of them would probably be interesting for each of the panelists to go around. So maybe we could do it in the same order that each of you have spoken, if that's okay. The first one is, what would you recommend for someone leaving school now who wants to pursue a career in sustainability? And I think sort of a second part to that is what kinds of skills, mindset, and knowledge. Maybe we'll lump those two together. So do we want to start with Robin?
Sure, happy to jump in on that. I think if you're leaving school now and you haven't necessarily studied sustainability or environmental studies as a subject, there are certainly a lot of resources available. A simple thing to do is just to check Coursera or other platforms which have many online courses available. This is how I found the course that I took with the University of Michigan about climate change and sustainability. So if you have a specific interest, search it out. You're bound to find something that matches your interests on one of the platforms. And I would say, your career search can probably be quite open. Almost every job at this stage of the world involves sustainability in some way. So you might be hired into a role as a banker, and you need to be thinking about, okay, how am I investing my clients' money sustainably? How am I ensuring that we're not perpetuating the support for fossil fuels and making sure that we can make that journey to net zero? you may be hired into a fashion company and, you know, find ways to ensure that your product is long lasting, is sustainable for long-term use, but then it has an end cycle where it can either be reused, given away, or sustainably recycled. So there's so many different career options now. And I would say, you know, depending on what your interest is, kind of just try to do your own research, learn a little bit more about it and how you could apply sustainability concepts into the career that interests you.
Masayo?
Okay. Actually, I totally agree with Robin. Actually, of course, it is depending on what strong field you have a desire to go for it, pursue. But look at the first what that person is very passionate about. If it is something to do with finance, you're strong in numbers, or you might be very strong in science or engineering, or it could be very much talking, people person, or you can be very much interested in clothing. So these industries, across industries, it is a lot of opportunities. So you don't need to really narrow down at the first sight. If totally it is not very sure, I think one way is to go for the online course to see whether the sustainability overall general studies is something that they want to pursue furthermore, or thinking of the graduate studies, which might help for the mid-career or more to as a required knowledge and career skill set. So actually what you can learn is it's out there, and there are lots of opportunities. And even you change the track from one industry to another, it is still possible. It is all interrelated. And it is not something that you first pick up and, oh, you made a mistake and you can't do any sustainability job anymore. It's not that. You have a lot of opportunities in many ways. So don't give up if you think it is far from that position. And that's all I can say.
Thank you. Armin, I think we're over to you.
Sure, thanks. I can only reiterate what Masayo and Robin said. So first and foremost, really follow, you know, your interests and your passion when you choose your subjects, right? And I think especially on the undergrad level, it's really more, it's not so important the specific subject, and try to keep it as a more generalist. And then, you know, you can specialize later on. But essentially, when you then are graduating, you know, the world is your oyster, right? Especially as the first professional job, you can apply to so many different types of roles and industries and departments. You know, in that sense, you don't need to worry too much about any particular specialization, or that you have a special, you know, master's in environmental design and systems engineering, etc. Right? For some careers, for some roles, yes, you might need to have that, but for most other sustainability related roles, you don't need that. And if you look at it, it's sustainability is no longer where it's in one department of a company, and we have, you know, 10 people, the sustainability team, you know, trying to make the company a bit more greener and a bit more, you know, more social and accepted in the community. It's really, it has become mainstream. Every single company now needs to think about how do they transition into a low carbon environment, right? Where do they buy their supplies from, right? Their components, their raw materials. What is their manufacturing or value adding process then? And then when they sell it and distribute it, how do they do that? Likewise, what kind of energy and heat and do they purchase? So pretty much every single career nowadays will have a certain sustainability component to it. And the key is really that, you know, you're interested in it and you read about it, you learn about it, and you know, follow your passion. That's what I would advise.
Anything to add, Smita?
I actually answered the question in the chat box, but I will just add to what my colleague said. While you are looking for courses and enrolling in courses, do keep a lookout for opportunities where you can do internships, volunteering with organizations and internships. And every time I say this in the career fair at UWC and at other places also, to master students of public policy, social work, because it is cross-cutting. As Armin clearly said, it is not just one level or one department, and it has metamorphosed over a number of years. Like we have been talking about social work, social development, international development cooperation, but now it is cross-cutting throughout corporate and throughout every other business. So do look out for opportunities, not just in terms of learning from different courses, online or physical, but also reach out to NGOs and non-governmental organizations and foundations where you can go in and have hands-on learning, do some voluntary work. That's about it. Thank you so much.
Katerina, do we want to introduce our fifth panelist?
Yes, if we have time, just a second. Professor Visser, are you there?
Yes, good morning, I'm here, but I don't seem to, yes, I can turn on my video also.
We're
Hello.
happy to see you.
Yes, sorry, a bit early here for me, but glad to be able to join you.
So the professor is based in the UK, so it's must be 7 o'clock over there, isn't it?
Yes.
So let me introduce you very quickly. So Professor Visser is a strategic analyst, sustainability academic, documentary filmmaker, and public speaker. So today in our panel, we wanted him to answer specific questions about education and about his career. But I see the time, so we won't have so much time for these questions. So what I will ask maybe are the 2 questions about education for our students, audience, and for the UWC community. So we'll go ahead with the students first. So what do you see, so for our UWC student audience, what do you see as an area and skills that will be especially needed in the future to meet our sustainability goals?
Yes, it's an interesting question. There are soft skills, I guess, and there are hard skills. From a hard skills point of view, definitely the whole STEM careers area continues to be important. So science, technology, maths, engineering. This is increasingly linked to everything. So especially with the digitization of the world, even work in sustainability is increasingly linked to technology and to the 4th industrial revolution. So, you know, I think it's important if people can get some of those skills. But then there are a number of what might be called soft skills. If we look at what we really need to solve many of these challenges, it's things like systems thinking, the ability to see the connections between things. It's the ability to be resilient, adaptive, creative. Also, you know, we need innovation if we're going to solve these problems. And as we've seen with recent crises, whether it's a pandemic or a war in Europe or a financial crisis before that, we can expect a more disrupted world. So the ability to be flexible and to adapt and to be resilient, I think, are going to be absolutely key. So these are the kinds of skills that increasingly will be needed for people who want to work in any career, but especially in sustainability.
Thank you. And regarding the UWC community, so we're talking about an audience of parents, alumni, but also all the guests that they are invited to this forum this weekend. Reviewing their own careers, do you have any thoughts on how they can explore their options to build the sustainability skill set? Do you see any executive education as a key options for them?
Well, we do now, fortunately, value a lot more the idea of continuing education. So the idea that you just studied once and then had a career, I think, is very, very outdated. And so there are always those opportunities to keep on building our own portfolio of learning. And for example, I run the Business Sustainability Management online course for Cambridge University. It's part-time, and we get people from all kinds of disciplines, all stages of careers, and they're able to do that alongside their job just to supplement their own core career. So definitely that's one of the elements, because I think the opportunity for enhancing your own career, but also supporting your children in making their choices has a lot to do with being able to understand what's changing in the world. And I wrote an article recently, which I might share with your community afterwards, if you like, called 5 Things That Parents Need to Do in order to support the move to sustainability. And a lot of it is about adapting your own work, of course, but also to make sure that they understand or are as well informed as their children, because often young people today are better informed than their parents, and then questioning your own bias. So these are things which, of course, do require ongoing education.
And a last one, translating sustainability into a profession, it's not an easy concept to understand or put into practice within an organization. How can professionals at every level in the organization play a part towards sustainability?
Yeah, this is the idea, very important actually in social systems and in natural systems, that a lot of self-organization happens. We often think of there being a leader and then everybody else being followers, but mostly in the world that isn't how it works. So you get self-organization, meaning effectively that everyone is a leader. And so what people really need to do then is to first understand what kind of a leader they are. And some of the research I've done suggests that there are 4 types of leaders who are wanting to make a difference. You get the experts, people who really, specialize in their knowledge and want to contribute something in terms of tasks and projects and quality of work. And they get very satisfied by that kind of work. That's a bit different from somebody who's a facilitator and really enjoys working with people, empowering others, looking after the development of others. And then you get the catalyst, who is much more interested in trying to change the organization itself. And they have more political skills in the sense that they're always having to try and influence others to change their behavior. And then finally, you get the activist, who is more of a grassroots sort of person who wants to ask the difficult questions and rock the boat a little bit and really agitate for change. And I think it really helps to understand what type of leader you are. We all actually have to put on all 4 of those hats, sometimes in one day, all 4, but we do have a gravitation towards one of them, depending on what gives us the most satisfaction. So my advice is to try to align your formal role to that informal type of leader that you are, because that's when you'll be most effective. And then you can adapt it to, whatever your work happens to be. Some of the work we've done on leadership also suggests some characteristics that will be useful, such as the ability to think long-term, the ability to have moral courage, the ability to be inclusive and to empower others. So all of that will help, but mainly it's about understanding yourself and how you can be most effective as a change agent. And once again, happy to share a little article on that for those who are interested.
Thank you, Professor Visser. Claire, I think we are almost at the end of the talk. Do we have any other questions maybe for the professor that arrived?
Would you like me to go to some of the prepared questions, Katarina?
No, it's just kind of like, do you have any questions from the audience? Or
I think most of the questions have been answered in the Q&A. You're right, we are coming close to the end of our time. And we can certainly move into the online networking session where people can speak a bit more freely. Did you want to say anything in conclusion?
yes, please. It's really crazy outside. It's a big storm. So yeah, I would like just to say thank you to my teammates, Smita, Masayo, Robin, Armin, and Professor Visser to join us, even if it's a little bit later than expected. And I would like also to say thank you to the Parent Association and the college to support us on our initiatives and on our work. And finally, I would like to thank you as an audience to attending this discussion. And if you would like to transition to the networking session, you're welcome to join us.
And on behalf of the college, thank you to our panelists for putting together such a great presentation, for sharing your experiences, for sharing your expertise. And we'd like to invite everyone to join us in the online networking session where you'll all be able to turn on your cameras and your microphones. I have just dropped that link into the chat there. I'll drop it in a few times as comments come in. Please, you should be able to just click right on the link and go seamlessly into that. If you have any problems, I will leave this Zoom session open to answer any questions that you have. But the panelists, I invite you to make your way over there now so that you can be there when our audience join. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And if there are members of the audience still here having problems, please feel free to put it in the chat if you have any questions.
Renee, Tatiana has a question. Are you optimistic that we will get over this crisis?
I think we'll probably, the panelists, I think by the look of it, have gone into the
Okay.
meeting room already.
I can answer if there's anybody else still listening. I don't know if people have disappeared.
Let's see. It looks, Tatiana looks like she might still be here.
Did you want me to answer?
Sure.
Yeah,
Actually, can you repeat
Tatiana
the
is here.
question, Christina? Because it'll be on the recording. So if you repeat the question and then the professor answers, we'll have a.
Okay. Tatiana's question is, are you optimistic that we will get over this crisis?
And by this crisis, which one?
I think she would have meant the COVID crisis, the pandemic crisis.
Okay. So I'll give you two short answers. The one is that I think that we will learn to live with COVID. So we have adapted and we will continue to adapt, and we will bounce back for sure, but we won't be living in the same world that we lived in before. And I think that's true of many crises. That's why I mentioned resilience. So what we have to do now is to learn to minimize the risk of crises, of course, support each other as we go through crises, and then have ways to bounce back after crises. And I think it's the same for COVID. I don't think it's going away. I think it will be with us for years and years, but we will get better and better about continuing to, with our lives and with our work while COVID is there. But since you used a magic word, are you optimistic? I thought maybe I would just throw in some creative words on optimism, because I think this is such a key now as we face many, many crises. You may not know this, but I'm not only a professor, I'm a poet. So for anyone still listening, I'm going to just share a short poem called Be an Optimist. And it goes like this: be an optimist, not because the future is bright, but because bright people are working to make the future better. Be an optimist, not because the news is good, but because good people are showing that change is always possible. Be an optimist, not because the world is fair, but because fair people are fighting for justice wherever it's needed. Be an optimist, not because you ignore the facts, but because the landscape of wider facts tell a story of remarkable progress. Be an optimist, not because the glass is half full, but because we always have the chance to tap a greater source of power. Be an optimist, not because you are blind and deaf and dumb, but because you see and hear and speak more clearly what is possible. That's just an extract from it. So, I think it's also an attitude, optimism and hope. It's not necessarily all about the circumstance itself.
Wow. Sorry, Tatiana actually added that it was about the climate crisis, and she's talking about the net zero goals.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Well, climate, I could answer in a similar way. We are living and we will live in a climate damaged world, and things will get worse before they get better. Will we make it to net zero? Are we moving in the right direction, and are we moving fast enough? These are difficult questions, but I believe we are actually. I think we are reaching tipping points on many of the issues, many of the changes that need to be made. They're not easy changes. This is another industrial revolution, but we're seeing a convergence between policy reform, social movements like the climate strike movement and Extinction Rebellion, technology breakthroughs and market opportunities. And what these are doing is all reinforcing one another. So although it seems like the change that we're having is too slow, that we won't make it, I actually think if you understand how change happens, it's never linear. It's more like how a virus spreads. So I think we will see an acceleration of change in the next decade, which will astound people. And I think that we will actually get to net zero by 2050. But we will live in a climate damaged world, even at 1.5 degrees. This is a very challenging world to live in. So once again, that important message about resilience and building resilience and being adaptive. And then, of course, we do everything we can to start drawing down the carbon even beyond net zero to become climate positive. But it's going to be a bumpy ride. The important thing is that everybody needs to do what's in their power, and all of those changes accumulate through the system and amplify each other. But everybody needs to be extremely bold in their actions. The time for small symbolic gestures is over. It really is a time of changing how we live, how we work, how we eat. For example, radically cutting down on meat consumption, red meat especially. These are all things that we can do. How we get around with transport, whether we drive electric or just use public transport, what we buy, and whether we are buying low carbon products. All of these things make a difference.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor
Thank you,
Visser.
Professor Visser.
So Rune, should we pass to the next session so this one can continue, because I see the time.
Looks like most people have stayed here. There are a couple of people actually, it looks like there's one participant in the online networking. I can ask him to return here. And the thing is they will have to just continue to discuss, like ask their questions through the Q&A. They can't turn their videos and cameras and microphones on.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I think we answered all of the questions that were in the Q&A, and Smita answered some of them. She typed a lot of them in and we addressed a number of them.
Maybe if you will indulge me further, I'm just so conscious that we live in trying times, and we're all struggling to make sure that we stay positive and proactive. And I just think that hope is one of the skills, if you want to call it a skill, that we all need, whether we're teachers or students or anybody else really. And you know, this is something that I just feel like we need to talk about. We have young people, many of whom are in despair, many of whom don't want to bring their own children into the world because they think that the world is not going to be a good place. And I think that we have to deal with that. And that's part of our role as teachers as well, is to, you know, firstly, work as hard as we can to make the changes so that it will be a better world, but also to deal with hope. And hope isn't necessarily about things all being bright and shiny and rosy. Hope is actually a strategy for coping in the world. And there's a beautiful book called Hope in the Dark, which I recommend, by Rebecca Solnit. I actually write about it quite a lot in my book, Thriving, as well. But I just wanted to share a quote from Rebecca because I think it tells us why hope is so important and what hope really is. She says, hope is not a lottery ticket you can sit on the sofa and clutch, feeling lucky. It is an axe you break down doors with in an emergency. Hope should shove you out the door because it will take everything you have to steer the future away from endless war, from the annihilation of the earth's treasures and the grinding down of the poor and marginal. To hope is to give yourself to the future, and that commitment to the future is what makes the present inhabitable. So I think that's really a powerful message.
Thank you, Professor. From our parent panelists, do you have any questions for the professor? I mean, I had an opportunity to have lectures and a few panel discussion with the professor, but do you have any questions for him?
If I may ask a question, Professor Visser, I mean, you've been working at one of the most prestigious universities in the world, and through your experience, how do you see that as an industry, right, and as an institution also change in terms of, you know, compared to 10, 20, 30 years ago when we went to university, essentially?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? So Cambridge is an 800-year-old institution. So we sometimes joke that it takes 800 years to change anything. But it's clear that there are changes. I mean, what I've noticed, and I've been now working in this area for more than 30 years, is that this really used to be something marginal, something like a specialist area that a few people would choose because they're interested or they're passionate about it. What I see now is that it really starts to be integrated into every subject. So if you're studying at the business school, you will, come across sustainability. You'll probably do a mini course on circular economy, for example. The engineering department, their center they have is a center for sustainable development. Architecture department renamed their department Sustainable Architecture. So what we see is that it's just become mainstream because it touches every single subject, and that's really what we need. Now, not everybody's there still. Some institutions are offering this as an elective course. That's a first start, but it can't end there, because really what you need is every subject to integrate it, every teacher, every lecturer to integrate it into their subject. What we've done at Antwerp Management School, where I also have a role, is we have a compulsory course called Global Leadership Skills. And I think this is quite a useful approach because it combines 3 core subjects, one of which is sustainability. We call it societal consciousness, but the other 2 are equally important. The second one we call global perspectives, and this is all about how you learn to work in diverse teams, to respect and understand different cultures. And then the third is self-awareness. So that is, how do you build that consciousness of who you are, and what type of personality you have, and how you can be most effective in the world. So I think that's a really powerful combination, and I haven't seen too many institutions, education institutions, that have combined in that sort of way. And yet for me, those are 3 key things that work together so well. So it's very, very different to what it was 10, 20 years ago. We could actually say that the last global financial crisis was probably the fault of all the MBA teachers, right? Because the business schools for decades have just been telling people it's all about the money. But that has changed. And we really start to see that it's mainstreamed. So now the challenge, I would say, for educational institutions is it's no longer in this world about information or even about knowledge, because we all have knowledge and information at our fingertips just by using a search engine. So now the teaching needs to be about how do you navigate that knowledge, including all of the fake news out there, or all of the contradictory science even. How do you help students to make sense of what's out there? So what we really need to give them now are tools and frameworks for differentiating what's true, what's helpful, telling them how to find and evaluate information. These become really important. Because also in the social media world, of course, people just rely on whatever's trending, and often what is trending has got very little relation to the science, for example. So to give a trivial example, right, I often, if I'm talking about renewable energy and electric cars, the first thing that I often get from classes is they'll say, yeah, but I heard that, it's an electric car is not as clean as a petrol or diesel car because, it has all these other impacts. Well, that's true. It has other impacts. It uses metals in the battery and so on. But compared to a fossil fuel car, it's way, way, way better, you know, even when you're powering it with a dirty grid that's still powered by fossil fuels. And so it gets cleaner all the time. And there are companies that are already setting up to recycle the batteries and so on. So you need to be able to have those debates, those discussions. It's the same with, you know, climate change as an example. So I spend a whole 3-hour class with my master's students, just using that as a lens to promote their thinking. So you take something like the Conference of Parties that was held in Glasgow last year, COP26. So most people coming out of that conference, at least if you read the media, you would see that this is a failure. And so I really use that to question that conclusion and say, okay, well, let's really look at it. What went down there? And when you use the underlying principles of systems thinking or thriving, what you discover is that actually it wasn't a failure. It's moved us quite dramatically in the right direction. But you need to give those thinking skills and those analytical skills to the pupils and the students. I think that's really important. See, there's a question of capitalism. Do we still have time to answer that?
Yes, we can have 2 minutes,
Sure.
Before we're wrapping up.
So capitalism is the dominant system today. I think it's the main, maybe even the only game in town. But it's not the same thing in different parts of the world. So what we've got is a diversity of capitalism, and the discussion should be, what kind of capitalism do we need that is going to serve us as society? Because we've seen some versions of capitalism that really don't serve society. On the one extreme, shareholder-driven capitalism has actually been pretty disastrous and has only served the people at the top. It's made the rich richer and left a lot of society behind. And on the other hand, you get very autocratic, if you like, the oligarch type capitalism, which I think has also been pretty disastrous. Then you get, you know, more a kind of social welfare capitalism, or what the World Economic Forum is calling stakeholder capitalism, which I think is a much better model for working with. There's also talk around long-term capitalism, and I think that's one of the key challenges that we have, is how do we take this very short-term, you know, very myopic, very focused on the money sort of capitalism, and turn it into something that really considers the future. And I think there are experiments in all those types of capitalism in different countries in the world. We have to change our measures, what we measure progress by, certainly not gross domestic product anymore. And we have to change the mechanisms. We have to question even the politics, because I think you've noticed around the world, most national politics is pretty broken, especially these dual party systems. And it's mostly corrupted by companies. So, you know, we have to change the capitalist system more and more, but it is the system we need to work with. It's a very elegant system for distributing goods and services. But it, you know, my view is actually, and I realize this plays to your context, but we do actually need strong government involvement in capitalism, because leaving the markets to themselves, which is really the experiment that ran in the United States for a couple of decades, really didn't work. I mean, it enriched a few and left the rest behind. So we do need governments to, in economic jargon, to internalize the external costs that are being placed on society and the environment. We need them to set the rules of the game, and to set those long-term targets like net zero and other targets, and then allow business through capitalism to innovate to get to those higher levels of quality of life.
Thank you, Professor. So I think we are at the end of the session, and we would like to thank you for being there today with us. And yes, we hope you enjoy the end of the day, and you can log in to other talks today on the platform ongoing on the campus. And yeah, thank you and have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.